Hello, I'm Chris, and this is Raidercast in partnership with Tomb Raider. In this episode, I'd like to invite you back to explore one of Lara's earlier adventures. This time, let's go behind the scenes of the design and creation of Tomb Raider Underworld with some special guests from Crystal Dynamics. Welcome, everyone. If all of the special guests would like to introduce yourselves and the role in which you played in creating Tomb Raider Underworld.
My name's Cam Yu, and I was the lead character artist on Tomb Raider Underworld.
I'm Rob Chang. I was a technical artist on Tomb Raider Underworld.
Hi, I'm Z Jones, and I have created a character for Underworld trailer.
Amazing. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're well. Right at the start, I always love to ask guests on Raidercast to talk a little bit about their Tomb Raider journey and how they first discovered or played Tomb Raider and really what it means to you guys. That'd be lovely to hear. So again, Cam, would you like to start?
I was first introduced to Tomb Raider and Lara Croft like when PlayStation 1 came out, and I bought it. You know, I was a poor starving artist at that time, and I loved video games, and when I started playing this, it just was amazing to me. It was like a whole new world, whereas other games were all like 2D sprite based. This was something that was different, and you could actually see an entire character from all angles, and you could explore the environment and so on, and it was just magical to me. Like it just really blew my mind, and I had it planted the seed in my brain that, you know, this is really what I want to do with my career, right? At that time, I was working as a medical illustrator, doing anatomical drawings, believe it or not.
Wow.
for medical texts and so on, and that was all right, but this was on another level, really. Like when I saw it, I just couldn't believe what was possible, and in my mind I sort of jumped to the future, and I thought, you know, this is something that's going to be big, right? Bigger than we can all predict. So I thought at that moment, you know, I really wanted to get into this. So yeah, it was really life-changing for me. That was my first experience with Tomb Raider. It really inspired me, and it inspired me to get into this field. So
that's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. Wow.
Thank you.
Z, how about you?
Well, I grew up playing video games, so it was I remember I was in the game store browsing through the shelf, and you know, when you go to the store, usually the game doesn't have a female cover. So it immediately grabs me. I saw a female character, very athletic, and posing with two guns, like staring at me. And I was like, what is that? So I immediately bought it. I rushed home and I turned on my game and I played it. My heart was like pounding so hard. I was like, oh my God. First time I felt like I'm the character, like in the game, like exploring. I haven't put down my controller for like, I think it was like 3 days. Like no one have seen me, and I just like am totally immersed into this world. And I always like strong female character, like Miyazaki's film and like all this story. So that was the first time I thought, wow, she is my hero. Like she becomes my role model, and I was like exercising and doing all that. And it really inspired me to become like a game artist at that point.
Fantastic. Wow. Cool. Robert, how about you?
Well, obviously, I mean, growing up, we always knew of Lara Croft. I played a lot of games, mostly fighting games, so it wasn't really the genre I was getting into. But from a career standpoint, it was interesting because Underworld was my first professional project, and Crystal was the first studio I ever worked at, and so, you know, coming on, I played through all of Legend, and Legend was essentially one of the only games I've ever completed like 100%. So getting into that was a lot of fun, and then, you know, obviously working on Lara Croft and Underworld was pretty life-changing. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, fantastic. So let's dive into a bit of design. Tell us a little bit about Lara's character in terms of her trademarks and sort of must-haves when you first started to design Lara for Underworld. How did that look evolve from the time of Tomb Raider Legend and Anniversary, and how did it grow into what we got in Underworld?
I guess I could speak to that. When Crystal took over the franchise, like we really had this huge task ahead of us, because Tomb Raider had built up such a following over the previous years, and it was pretty much Lara was pretty much a pop icon at that time. So it's like, what are we going to do with it? So what we did with Legend was that we continued on with that design aesthetic for Lara, and for familiarity purposes, like people were gotten used to that, the way that Lara looked, and we tried our best to carry on that tradition so people would feel comfortable and recognize her. But with Underworld, we were presented with an opportunity to change her a little bit, and I kind of see it like it was the natural progression of that aesthetics. Like, we took whatever we designed in Legend, and we pushed it to its logical conclusion. So you see, she has a sort of a caricaturized look, which was developed, early on with the franchise, and we continued that. But of course, there's other factors that come in. People want to see, some growth in the character, and we always try to incorporate some of the narrative in, right? Like she's a little bit older, a little bit more mature, and so forth. So we incorporate that into the model as well. Technology also plays a huge role in it. Like, as consoles got better and better, we were able to do more with her model. And at that time, polygons was the realm of the kingdom, and each console we were able to put more and more polys into the model, just to make her more realistic. So, but having said that, I mean, yes, there's all these forces driving her evolution, but there's always that core DNA that we adhere to, like the particular look, certain features on Lara that we retain from game to game, and you can see it throughout the entire timeline.
I mean, in the details, like, just some of the stuff you're saying, where we kept pushing the look. I mean, this Lara is probably slightly more caricaturized than some of the previous ones we've been talking about, like the longer legs and the shape of the hands. We tried to do things like, evolving the technology. I believe we were saying this one had wrinkle maps or something in the forehead. We tried to fake a better skin appearance. I'm not saying we totally succeeded in every way, but especially compared to like modern technology, but we were trying to push the shaders as far as we could to give her, a better skin response than the previous games.
I think it still holds up today. I think it still looks really damn good.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and definitely, like in some of the the Thailand level, especially when she's underwater or when she comes up, you can see there's like a high specularity on the skin. It's supposed to appear wet, all this other stuff, and the clothing as well.
That's cool.
I think we retained a lot of that sort of, like I said, the caricature nature of her model, like her really long legs and so forth. But I think for that time, and with that storyline, it really sort of fit. Like that look really worked for her. And of course, when we sent it over to C, and she did the cinematics for it, she was even able to plus up that model even more and add detail and stuff and effects that we were never able to do in game, right? Like those posters and so on and cinematics look fantastic, the work that you did. See,
Yeah, back in the days, I was working for cinematic studio, the Blur Studio, and then when they come over visit and then show me the storyboard, I was like chicken skin everywhere. I was like, oh my god, this the music for Mozart, like the story, like it was just mind blowing, and I felt like this is like I felt like this is destiny. Like I got to work on Lara Croft cinematic, and I dive in. I pretty much rewind all my memories of her when she comes out, the way she looked, the way she felt, the way I felt in her characters. I portray that energy that she inspired me and just put everything in her face, even the strands of hair, how she framed in polygon. Imagine her in cinematic and just like her pose. And I actually just like hold two objects and like really felt like charging up like a superhero, and then I inject it into her characters, and I think it came out because everything, like her gaze and her smile and her structure of her bone and her hair even have energy. So I think I put that into the character. I think the audience, I was hoping the audience can feel who she is and what she stands for, and she's like something iconic and new and inspired young woman like myself, and I want the rest of the world felt that. So I felt like when Kim and the team give me feedback, I was so happy that they can see that energy as well.
That's amazing. That was wonderful. I loved hearing that. That's so cool. Ah, so there's another thing as well. Like you were talking about the tech as well, of especially like her skin and how are different facial things, like with her frowns and things, because obviously, Cam, you were saying that it fits this game and in a particular way as well, because Lara herself, she is angry in this game. She has had it. And I think a lot of the way in which she's animated, the way she holds herself, the way that she looks, her gaze, her glare, her mouth, everything, it ties in, it knits together so well for the narrative of the story. And I think that was really well. And just as well, this isn't actually related to what I just said, but something that's just sprung to mind now, again, in regards to her skin. I think in Mexico, when it's raining and there's that amazing storm, there's parts where she's going in and out of undergrowth and the rain stops and starts, depending on whether or not she's under something. And you can walk from shelter out into the open, she will start getting wet. And I think then if lightning flashes, the lightning refracts only off part of her that's actually facing it. And it's little tiny touches like that I think stand up so well today.
You know, I look back on it and it's just like, wow, we were actually able to do quite a bit back then, even with limited technology. Like, I remember at that time, you know, ZBrush had just come out. We had just normal maps were something that we used, but not extensively. Like Legend, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but Legend didn't have normal maps, right?
I actually
like,
wasn't on Legend. Sorry, I don't.
Well, Legend, okay. Legend, I don't believe we had normal maps. It was all just color maps and
wow,
and roughness maps or specular maps. But here, you know, we had this new tool bag, little new toys to play with, and we tried to leverage that as much as possible. I mean, cinematic world is completely different. Like you guys were able to just take it, go to town with the technology, but you know, even having the little wrinkles on her forehead, like that was a big deal for us. And the fact that she got wet, I think that and she got dirty as well. Like these are environmental effects that we were experimenting with, and I think quite successfully. She turned out really well.
Amazing. Is there are there any ideas for Lara in Underworld that you would have loved to have been able to incorporate in terms of her design or even anything about her, but that for whatever reason didn't make it into the final game?
There was a half track, Rob.
Yeah, that's right. The bike originally was going to be a half track. In fact, in that website that you sent us, there's a concept of it. And for whatever reason, we couldn't do the half track. But I remember, oddly enough, like we were having problems with the track. Like before we decided not to do the half track, we were having problems with the track. And it was a question of like getting the track to look like it was actually spinning. And we couldn't do that using polygons, obviously, but we were actually trying to control it using like, panning textures and whatnot. But I don't think that's why we scrapped the half track, but it would have been kind of fun to see that thing, in reality.
Was there a couple of different levels that had sort of extended bike
So the one I
sections?
remember was the Mexico level, right? She's bumming around in that motorbike, and then she drives down into the ball court that opens up, and then she has to park the bike at some point and go off on foot. But I think that's pretty much where that would have come in.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Mozart reverse explosion teaser trailer for Tomb Raider Underworld, because I remember when that came out, and even now I'm just getting like goosebumps thinking about it, because it was quite a moment, and I think to this day it is possibly one of, if not the most iconic trailer of the entire series, because on a whole other level that was like a technical marvel. What you guys did was just mind-blowing. That, can you tell us a little bit more about the ideas, where this came from for this trailer, how you guys went about creating it?
I do remember that Daryl came in one day and said, I have this fantastic idea. I would love to say he said it came to him in a dream, but I can't remember, like I think he said, this came to me in a dream last night, and I thought about it, and it was like, wow, imagine a reverse of the mansion exploding. And I was like, ooh, sounds great. But if it's not true, I'll start that rumor right now anyways. But it came to him in a dream, and but it was his idea. I thought it was fantastic. But see, you carried out the actual production of that cinematic. Like that was quite a feat.
I played a small part, which is like the character parts, but I remember Daryl came in with a whole crew of people, and I was already really excited. And they went over the storyboard, and I mean, from my experience, I thought it was poetry in the cinematic, and the way they just have like a memory of who she is, and having all this set of her guns and like her mansion and everything she gone through, like it's like being part of her life, but in a very poetic way. And then I was given a task to make the doppelganger of Lara Croft, which is like the opposite of her.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I have to think of everything is like good and evil, and how do I mix those two but still having the iconic look without off characters. So I did a lot of thinking about the makeup, and there's micro expressions on the face, like how one is smirking and the other one is like very heroic, and one is kind of like you can feel her kind of like same model, but same exact model, but texture a little bit differently. Her hair is a little bit messier on the evil one, and the iconic one is more heroic. So I really dive in and try to give that Lara at the end. She's the doppelganger of the real Lara, because she blew everything up that Lara loves and cares about. So that for me is very, very different to make a hero, an evil version in the main cinematic. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. I still listen to that music on my soundtrack when I work sometimes, just to remember that nostalgic feeling of that impact on my life.
Wow. So were there already concepts of the doppelganger as it came to you, or were you tasked with actually designing and creating the doppelganger as well?
I don't think that was a concept. Maybe that was a in-game model, I remember, with a darker lipstick, but that's about it. And so I think for the cinematic version, because we have to create a lot of extra details on her, so I did a lot of back and forth and iteration to compare the two and see if they look too similar, or like or you don't want to get it too off-brand, like so that's a lot of iterations on it.
That doppelganger actually went through a lot of iterations. I'm really happy with what we ended up with, and I think she looks appropriately scary, but she didn't start out that way. Like with those particular looks, like initially she was this really sort of anemic, skinny version of Lara with dark hair and sort of veins all over her and some glowy skin. So we experimented with her looks quite a bit before deciding on this final version, and that was an interesting process anyways. Like I still have a lot of those concepts about the doppelganger of the doppelganger, and yeah, that was really fun, sort of really fun character to play with.
I do love looking at all of the old pieces of concept art for especially like all of the characters as well. And I think of course as well, one of the other characters who got a little makeover was Amanda as well. Of course, you had her in Legend. She had her innocent young phase, and then she grew into her slightly more evil Willow phase, where she's sort of gone off the edge of the dark side, and then she sort of changes again. I think she lose the tattoos for Underworld as well? Was that a thing?
I think she still had them, at least in concept. Like she had tons of tattoos, but yeah, she was a really fun one to concept out. Like she has a very iconic face, and we wanted her to look bad, but not to the extent that Nadla was iconically evil. But the difficulty was just finding the personality in their models. So we went through many iterations on that.
No, it's interesting to sort of as well see the visual differences between the likes of Amanda and Nala. And I always think that it's suspicious that Lara seems to have a particular hatred for blondes as well.
That could be.
So what can we talk about in terms of the technical achievements whilst creating the environments and how Lara interacted with her surroundings?
I mean, looking back at the game, like once again, I'm going to say I was really impressed when I look back. Like it just reminded me how good the tech was and how Lara was so agile in the environment. Like she was using her grapple. She could do wall runs. She could flip off horizontal poles. It was pretty amazing for the time. Like I think we really did a great job just pushing the tech and just demonstrating how athletic Lara actually was. And then she was interactive with their environment too, like in the mansion scene where it was burning. Like she would like put her hands up when there was a fire and so forth. But
she brush foliage away as well. She's running past things.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that worked so well. We carried it forward into all our following games as well too. Like, but that was just the sort of the start of that believable Lara, which has always been our goal, just to make Lara someone that you could believe in. And part of that is just getting her to interact with her environment like that. So if it's cold, she'll do this, she'll sort of shiver and so on. But the Underworld was really the testing ground for a lot of that technology. Also the wet and the dirt effects that we were talking about earlier, right, Rob? Like there was a lot of emphasis on getting her to react to the environment as well, right?
Yeah. I can't remember the mechanism we used for it, but yeah, like we were saying with the, when she's in water, you can see the skin a little more specular highlight, and the clothing darkens and things like that. I mean, definitely for the environment, we put a huge amount of effort into making it look a certain way. We, sent guys out on location shoots to like Mexico and Thailand and stuff, and basically worked from that source material. So there was definitely a huge conscious effort to inject like a fair amount of realism and detail into the world she was in. So basically believability is, we were pushing for that in every level and every stage. So.
Wow, absolutely succeeded, I've got to say. I think the environments are beautiful. Like some of them are absolutely breathtaking. I think In particular, I think Thailand is a big fan favorite.
Yeah.
And I think people seem to focus on the giant spiders in Mexico. But it's still, I'm not a spider fan. I've got to say, I'm not a spider fan, but I love Mexico. I think the entire ambience, the way it looks, sounds, the whole vibe and atmosphere of Mexico is just, it's one of my favorites of the entire series. I think it's magnificent.
Can I talk about my favorite bug?
Yeah.
Like literally, I remember this, and I'm telling the story, and I'm like, was this really real? Because it sounds crazy, but I remember one day when we were doing Mexico, somebody messed up the audio between the mercs and the lizards, and so for the whole day, the lizards were running around speaking Spanish. I was like, yeah, I should have kept that.
Make it an unlockable. That's really funny.
I sure wish we kept like better records of all these bugs, just for posterity, you know, so people would know.
Underworld was the first game in the series to have in-game motion capture for Lara, and I'm not sure whether or not other characters were mo-captured for cutscenes or anything, but we know that Lara was mo-captured by, I believe, an Olympic gymnast. Is there anything that you can talk about in this regard? Like, was it a particularly different way of working? Did it hinder things? Did it help things?
Well, definitely, this just goes back to our real goal of making a believable Lara. Like, believability comes through her model for in one respect, but it also comes through in her behavior, in her animations, her materials, her physics. Like she had really good physics on her ponytail. We used the cloth physics back then. So, you know, having mocap as a part of our production was just another sort of brick in that wall, just to make her a believable, relatable character. Yeah, whenever we design Lara, that it really comes down to that. That is the overarching goal: is to how are we going to make her so that people can relate to her, people can sort of put themselves in her shoes and kind of feel sort of sympathetic towards her. So a lot of this technology is like not put in just because of the sake of technology. It's put in because we want to convey that message. We want to convey that relatability about Lara, and that's super important to us.
Yeah, speaking of hair and ponytail, I remember Laura's hair is like a character by itself.
It is.
Yeah, so I think her hair it reacts to environment, jumping, and the way it accentuates her athletic ability. So I think that was something that in the cinematic, even the explosion, her hairs are like flying in the air, and I kind of carried that through to the later on, like when Kim was talking about evolution of Laura tech. The hair tech in the Trested Fest, I was bringing on the cinematic hair tech to that team, and I think that was one of the most proud thing I worked on is her hair, because I make it like its own character, like the way it drums, the way they sway in the water. So that was something that it was really awesome to see in the old days, like the hair carry-ons in the future. It was a long time, like putting one strand at a time.
I remember that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Z, you were talking about how like the hair and everything is like some of the things that you're most proud of. Robert and Cam, what are some of the other things that you guys are most proud that you managed to bring to Tomb Raider Underworld?
For myself, I'm most proud of being just a part of the franchise, of doing my tiny little part for it. She has such a rich history and legacy that being a part of it and knowing that what we're doing is getting out to like millions of fans out there, that is actually the thing that I'm most proud about. It's the games I'm really proud about, the models. I've worked on every Lara model since Tomb Raider 7, with the exception of 1 or 2, but even the digital versions, like I'm really proud of those. But it's just having played a part in this legacy. I think I'm most proud of.
That's great.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. It's just been a privilege to work on the series and to work on the franchise, work on Lara Croft. I mean, it was a huge learning experience for me. I mean, this was my first production in games, so I was just really happy to work on it, and just glad that it kind of worked out the way it did. So
that's wonderful. Is there any cut content that didn't make it into the final game that you wish had? Anything that springs to mind?
It's such a long time ago.
For myself, I don't know about cut content, but honestly, I think with every project I work on, I just wish we had more time. You just want to make it that extra little bit better all the time, and I think that's part of the craft. That's part of what we do.
Last question, little fun one, just for everyone. If there's a specific scenario or place that you personally would love to see Lara just dropped into, what would you do?
New Orleans, Deep South.
You know, it sounds sort of counterintuitive to the to her sort of tomb raiding background, but I personally really love the Japan level, the city level in Tomb Raider 7. So I know that's not her natural habitat, but
that's good. It brings variation.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it's a nice variation, but yeah, I just dropped that in there just as
I think in terms of modern environments, there's one thing that I keep seeing and hearing about and thinking, God, I want Lara to go there, and it's the Vatican archives.
Oh yes.
Can you imagine the things she would find in there? That'd be amazing.
Lara Croft meets Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, just go down there being like, oh, that's Atlantean, I've got one of those, it's fine. No, so
she's explored so many different places, it's really hard to say.
I like to see Laura's a little bit exploring to space. That would be awesome.
I would like that too. I got shouted at the last time I suggested that. I like that idea.
I like a slightly sci-fi. She's almost like a scientist, right?
Why not? I think so. Given the right context, I think it could work.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
So, Cam, Robert, and Z, thank you so much for joining me for this Raidercast in partnership with Tomb Raider special episode for Underworld. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks very much.
Cool.